How are you guys doing? All right. First of all, thank you for being here on a sleepy Sunday in Southern California. My name is Jeff Easterling. I'm a writer on the franchise team at 343 Industries. We do the Halo stuff. On the franchise team, we deal with fiction across our entire universe. So whether that be dealing with games, books, comics, novels, linear media stuff, animated things, all sorts of stuff. If it has lore on it, we're touching it in some sort of fashion. Hopefully good. So, anybody here fans of the lore and extended fiction for Halo? That's awesome. This will be a better conversation then. Okay. How we doing in the VR line? VR Nation, how you guys doing? Awesome. We tried to get seats for you, and they said something about like fire code. So I'm sorry, but we're here for you. So hopefully this is enjoyable for you guys as well. And good luck in your next match. How are you guys doing?
Great.
All good?
Great.
I have an incredible cast up here. Some of my absolute favorite people who write some of my absolute favorite things to help with and look at and read. Starting off with the wonderful Kelly Gay. Everyone give it up for Kelly Gay. I don't know if you guys have read her, some of the latest Halo stories are her stories. Smoke and Shadow and the fan-beloved Halo Renegades. Any Renegades fans out there? All right, let's go. Also, as kind of like a little last-minute surprise guest for you guys, we have the one and only Christie Gloden. Everybody give it up for Christie Gloden.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, Christie Gloden, not only having written a story for Halo Fractures, but also doing a lot of cool stuff in other franchises. There's a little indie franchise called Star Wars, I think, that it's going to be big. It's going to be big, and you're going to make it big. It's going to go places. And doing some Blizzard stuff, right?
I am.
We can talk about it. It's okay. We're all friends.
Okay.
Small industries.
We all love games, man.
Who knows who works for who in a few years? So let's. All right. Everybody give it up for Troy Denning.
Hi.
Also no stranger to some good Star Wars books, by the way. Yeah. So, but we're here to talk about some of his amazing Halo work. And he's got actually a couple of different irons in the fire. Most recently, Halo Silent Storm, which is an incredible Master Chief story. And the sequel to that is actually coming up in just a few short weeks, which is Halo Oblivion. Anybody plan on picking that up? Good. Awesome. Good stuff. Also, do we have any fans of Veda Lopez and the Gammon? Oh, look, there's Monica. Also, Last Light and Retribution, amazing stuff. And last but certainly not least, Nathan Fillion. Matt Forbeck, who is actually the voice in Nathan's head, or the other way around. I don't remember which one. Everybody give it up for Matt Forbeck, guys. It was really cool how you got a couple of actors to portray New Blood on the cosplay contest last night. Anybody see the Veronica Dare and Buck cosplay yesterday? Absolutely incredible. It literally was like New Blood came to life. New Blood, Bad Blood, and of course another favorite of mine, Legacy of Onyx. Anybody read Legacy of Onyx? All right.
Okay, good.
So enough of me. We want to talk to you guys. Actually, I want to start over with Matt.
Shit.
Yeah. Got him.
You're on mic, man.
You're on. So, speaking of the, what is it like to write in first person versus third person? Like if you're trying to, the approach that you take to something like Legacy of Onyx versus the approach that you take to something like New Blood, what kind of headspace do you have to get into to tell that story?
That's a good question. When I'm doing New Blood, obviously, or Bad Blood, I have Buck's voice in my head, Nathan Fillion's patter, right? So I spent a lot of time actually, playing the game, watching Fillion do all sorts of different things, any TV show, Firefly, Castle, whatever else, just getting that kind of pattern, because he definitely has that kind of even though it's Buck, it's still Nathan in a lot of ways, and a lot of his stuff transfers over from property to property. And you can still see that he's the same person, like Captain Hammer and that. Dr. Horrible sing-along vlog, exactly.
This is an audience participation.
Exactly.
show,
So
Good job,
when you're doing first person, though, you have to remember that it's all coming from that person, and so they color everything they say, and they can be an unreliable narrator, and it's definitely all from their point of view. Whereas with a third person point of view, you have that step back. There's a bit of a remove from the actual story being told. Somebody else saying, this is what happened to other people, as opposed to, with Buck, it's like Buck sitting down next to you in a bar and saying, dude, I have to tell you what happened. This is the most amazing thing, right? And letting him just ramble on like that. And having that rattle around the back of my head for 6 months or so at a time, it's a blast, actually. I just love doing it.
Troy, what is it like having two kind of like fiction storyline streams going in your head kind of at the same time? Because again, you have, and they're different styles as well. When you look at something like Silent Storm and Oblivion, that is very much that we've talked about, almost like the Batman Year One kind of style chief story early in the Spartan program, earlier in the Covenant War. But then you also have stuff like Beta Lopus and the Gammas. It's a little bit later, and you're still involving Blue Team, but far apart from a timeline perspective. How do you keep that going in your own head?
Well, it's a matter of, when I write the character, even though I'm writing in third person, I am trying to be in the character's head and describe everything through that character's perceptions. So when I'm in Veda's head, for example, I am thinking like a detective, and I try to think of questions that she would be asking and observations that she would be making. And when I go to the Master Chief's head, I'm thinking to the extent that I'm capable of, like a Spartan or a Special Forces soldier. It's like, all right, he's not too interested in the subtleties of what that speck of dust is doing there instead of there. He's just interested in, is it going to kill me, and how do I get to my objective? So it's all pretty much just a matter of keeping straight in your head who they are, and not mixing up Veda when you're writing Master Chief. I did that a couple times.
That's a different book.
Yeah.
Very, very different book. Kelly, actually, I want to skip over to you real quick. Within your story, especially when you look at something like Renegades, in Smoke and Shadow, we started off with Ryan Forge, and she's, it's a very more like a Firefly-esque character kind of story. When you get to Renegades, you start to actually involve some different themes in the Halo universe. It's still that kind of intimate family story, but now you're also digging into some really deep lore Halo nerd stuff.
Yeah.
Is it a challenge to kind of go to that grandiose place when you're looking at crazy ancient Forerunner mystery stuff, but also dive right back in and tell the more intimate character moments within the same story?
No.
That's it. Just no.
Yeah, sorry. No, I actually, because I have a great love for the ancient history of Halo and the Forerunners, so I didn't find it difficult to kind of think of that and absorb, the bigness of it, because I feel like even in that story there were so many intimate moments, between the Librarian and Greg Bear's wonderful trilogy, the Forerunner saga.
Anybody a Forerunner saga fan? Greg Bear?
Yeah. But I found that even though it was such a large story, to me it felt very intimate. So bringing that into Ryan's story, I found fit pretty well and fit easily.
And shout out, by the way, Kelly, one of the best things about a job like myself, and also shout out to a guy who's a writer on our team who really spearheads work with the authors and the novels from our end, named Jeremy Patnout. Everyone say, hi, Jeremy.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Jeremy.
Just in case he ever sees this. He's going to get mad at me now. I love you, Jeremy. But when we talk about it and look at it, we always laugh. Kelly goes super deep cut. I think you have alt accounts on our Halo story and stuff like that. We're reading stuff and she's incorporating Loot Crate lore, in stuff. We're I don't know if anybody's gonna get this. It's incredible. This is so good. But it's amazing that can you talk about some of the what you do from a studying and a research standpoint for that?
Yeah, it's Actually, I have about somewhat of about a year to write the whole novel. I spend more time researching the novel than I actually do writing it. So I'll just, I let it stew in my head and I research. And even during my personal time, it's in my head and I'm thinking about it. And I like to dig as deep as I possibly can because you never know what you might find and what connects to your story. And I thoroughly enjoy that, but, and I'm glad Ed's not here today to hear this, my editor.
She's watching somewhere.
But I usually think about a book for, I can think about it for 6 months and then realize, oh crap, I have 2 months to write this book or 3 months. But
any procrastinators out there? All right.
But it works for me because I've had all that time to just absorb all this material, and it's fitting puzzle pieces in my head. So by the time I start writing, it goes very quickly.
You said a couple things that I'd actually love to get your opinion on. Number one, you talked about the interesting as viewing the Forerunner stuff as not necessarily always grandiose, but also very intimate. Your story actually encapsulates that really well because you're dealing with, again, some of the really bigness of the Halo universe, but it is approaching it from a very intimate setting. It even starts with, very more close quarters kind of conversations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's something that I really gravitate to is connections between characters. And when I was approached to write the short story, I was not at all, unfortunately, familiar with the Halo lore. And when I try to write something, I think of it kind of like as this big building. A franchise is a big building. There's so much to it. So I have to find the door that lets me in. And so when we were talking about ideas, the Forerunners just really kind of grabbed onto my heart because they're so tragic. They're so vast. They have all this knowledge, all this experience. They live for frickin' ever, and yet what happened to them is it's on such a huge scale. And what I wanted to do was take it down to the absolute smallest. I mean, in the end, it's really a love story about two people who have to close the door on everything. But it's sad, but I think it's also, in the end, very hopeful and very, dare I say it, very human.
Yes.
Now, we've talked about, with a couple of us, trying to keep different streams in your head in line. And it's one thing to do it within the same franchise, but you're also working on a lot of other franchises.
Yeah.
Like, as a professional, and many of you do dabble in several franchises, Christie, can you speak to what it's like to, what are the things you do in your head to keep some of those streams consistent?
Sure, but first I have to tell you a little joke that I would say when I was dealing with this. I would keep this in mind. I was actually writing Jaina and Jaina for two different franchises. Jaina Proudmoore for World of Warcraft and Jaina Solo for the EU. And that was happening at the same time. And I'm like, just get your Jaina straight.
Brilliant plan.
Your Jaina straight. But
crossover just begs to be written.
Well, I had a little thing on Facebook, and somebody torpedoed it immediately because they got it. I said, okay, it's one of those who will win things, all right? Jaina Proudmoore versus Jaina Solo. And there were just a couple of people who went back and forth, and one person said, neither, because they'd realized they were on the same side and be friends. And I'm like, that was it. That was it. But to answer your question, I'm theater trained. And I only realized, I was doing this subconsciously, but I only realized that I was doing it deliberately very recently. So I act the parts. When I go in my head, I don't read them aloud and start around the apartment, but when I'm writing for a character, I really settle into them, and I do what you do. I listen to the voice. I catch the voice. If I can catch the voice, then I can catch the dialogue. And then I imagine how the character moves. Usually you've seen it. It's from an IP that you've got a visual. And then I'm like playing the character. And it makes it easy for me to come up with dialogue that feels appropriate because I'm already in the role.
I don't care what you say. Now the image in my head is that you are straight up just Broadway Shakespearean acting out all of the parts in your house.
My dream job was musical theater. And it's really fun. I now get to, at Blizzard, I now get to narrate my own audiobooks there.
Did
So.
all of you guys want to grow up to be writers?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any aspiring writers out there? Awesome.
Keep the faith.
Keep doing it. Keep doing what you're doing. So I have a question. We had some conversation. We actually were talking at dinner the other night about differences in approaches.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love, we talked about like outlines.
Yeah.
And some people, already, yes, a pox upon thee. So some of you guys love outlines, some of you don't. But for aspiring writers, like, can you talk about some of the different approaches that you have? Troy, I want to start with you. Like, what is an approach that you take when you are going ahead and writing out a book, no matter what franchise it's for?
Okay. I'm going to start off with just quoting a couple of things, as I love to read about writing. And Stephen King wrote a book about writing in which famous line that I remember is, "Outlining is for wimps." Right? And that's a perfectly legitimate approach, and it works.
Kelly, write that.
What's that? Yeah.
I did.
It works pretty well for Stephen King, right? But Terry Brooks wrote a book, I can't remember the title of it, but also a book on writing, in which he talks about his approach, which is a lot closer to mine, is that I have to really get all the pieces in place before I start to write, because otherwise I get lost in the writing. I don't know where I'm going, and so I'd spend more time just wandering around and doing nothing. And both of those are absolutely legitimate approaches. I find when you're in tie-in writing, like we are, that to some degree you have to be able to do the Terry Brooks approach, because you're not just writing a book for yourself, you're writing a book for the IP holder, and they want to know what you're doing. They want to know that you're going a place that they want you to go. And so you're laying out a plan to some extent that describes what you intend to do. And I've found through the years that the more I spill out the details of that plan, the less rewriting I have to do.
Right.
So I sit down, and I just have through the years developed the habit of thinking this way. I'll sit down and kind of plot out the big pieces of the book. This is the first third is going to cover this, the second third is going to cover this, and the third, the final will cover this. And then I write the outline, just kind of shaping the story as I go along. And they end up being, like 30, 35 pages. So that's 10% of the book. I mean, my outlines can be 10% the length of the book, but I find when I do that I'm a lot more confident actually writing the book. And I know, for instance, when I can try to do, the nightmare scenario for a writer is I write 5 chapters that the IP holder says won't work, right? When I write an outline like that, I know...
I would never say that.
When I write an outline like that, I know that that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it actually frees me up to write what I want within those parameters. And
Man, I would love to talk about the outline for some of your next stories. That's a different panel. Production crew over the back. First of all, can we shout out the tech crew and the production crew that keeps everybody running, all these things running really, really smooth. Production crew, can I get a timer on here? That way I know how much time I can allow for these guys. How are we doing in the VR line? Are we still good back there? Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. Do all of you guys also have your own IPs?
Yeah.
That you work for, or like that you kind of
That
write?
we own original work?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, of course.
How do you approach that differently, Matt? What are some of the big differences between my stuff, their stuff?
Well, when you work on your own stuff, you're the boss, right? You don't have to answer to anybody else. You don't have to worry about approvals. You don't have to worry about fans saying, wait a minute, it didn't happen that way in this game or this book or whatever else, because it all comes out of your head. You're the final arbiter for everything, right? To use a Halo term. Right, there you go. So it's kind of refreshing in that way, but then you also have to do all the heavy lifting for world building and character development and visualization in your own head. So it's wonderful to work in an established franchise where a lot of that's been done for you, and hopefully you're a fan of it and you're excited by it as well. but it's a whole different kind of challenge, and it's very exciting to be able to do that for your own original work, right? So I really enjoy doing that. I generally start off with a high concept for a pitch, right? I'll say this meets, I'm working on a book right now that's kind of World of Warcraft meets No Country for Old Men, right? And you're like, oh, okay, that's an interesting crossover. And
Pre-ordering now.
Exactly, there you go. And if you can boil it down to that and then try to steer everything you're working on toward that high concept, then it makes it easier for you. It also makes it easier for people to get excited about the book, for people to sell the book as they go along. And you don't have to worry about that as much when you're working with a franchise, because the franchise is doing a lot of heavy lifting for you there. They've already got the fan base that we're trying to appeal to and make excited about what you're working with.
Do all of you have, could you pick out, I'm going to start with Kelly and go down the line. Is there a book or an author that as you were kind of either early in your career or even growing up, that really kind of inspired you to be like, oh wow, this makes me want to be a writer, or I would love to do something like this book or this author one day?
Yeah, Anne Rice.
Okay.
For sure.
Any specific book?
Probably Interview with Vampire.
Yeah, I hear some yays back there.
Classic.
Yeah. How about you, Christy?
Catherine Kurtz, the Dorini books.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah.
All right. I always love the little scattered, yes!
Somebody out there knows.
My favorite!
Yeah.
Right?
When I was growing up and about the time I decided I wanted to be a writer, I was reading Asimov and Clarke and Tolkien, and I thought, well, all right, they're okay. I can probably do better. So, yeah.
That's what
15 years
inspires
later, I
every writer.
published my first book.
That's what inspires every writer. You have to be able to sit there and say, oh, come on, I can do better than that, right? If you don't think you can do better than that, what the hell are you doing? You shouldn't step up to the plate, right?
Yeah.
That's just Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah. There's that, yeah. For me, I think it was Neuromancer, William Gibson, right? I'd read a lot of stuff before that, but that just kind of blew my brain away. I'm like, oh, I don't have to be in this tradition here. I can actually start doing new things that are mine and do more exciting things than just doing riffs off Asimov and Heinlein and everything else. Just a whole fresh new look at things.
And Matt, actually, you not only do more novel approach and stuff, but you've also written things like encyclopedias for Marvel. What's the big difference with something like that? Is that just more research based rather than the creative side?
Oh yeah, I mean, when you're doing an encyclopedia, like I wrote a couple Marvel encyclopedias and the Avengers encyclopedia and a Captain America book, all this stuff. You're doing research and you're trying to encapsulate what other people have done, right? So it's really like writing a boatload of little research papers for school, right? And you want to try to put in your own words and make it as succinct as possible and entertaining still at the same time, right? Because you can't just say and this and this and this and this, because it becomes dull, and because it'll make it dull for you too. But the funny thing is, if I can write an encyclopedia when I'm at death's door, right? It's like I could read a comic and I can tell you all about it. Writing a novel, I actually have to feel fresh, and you have to engage every part of your brain for this kind of stuff. It's a very different set of writing muscles that you're using at this point.
Christy, what are you doing right now? What's your big thing right now?
Well, my big thing is right now I'm working for Blizzard Entertainment.
Awesome.
I'm working in their story and franchise development.
Okay.
And what that means is that the game teams come to us when they want a cinematic or a comic or a short story or a song, and our team gets the fun job of doing that. Mostly I've done the in-game cinematics for World of Warcraft.
That's awesome. Any Warcraft fans or Blizzard fans out there? Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm actually particularly interested in that, from our similar role, on our franchise team for Halo. What do you find are some of the differences in your approach and thinking now when you have, instead of, I'm focusing on a particular story, okay, now I'm having to step back and give a broader view of not only how this story is fitting in, but how other things, and then when you said, when you now mix in a game team that is coming to you that has their own set of constraints and restrictions, can you talk a little bit about the dynamics of that?
Well, we have our compass, the 8 points of our compass, and one of them is, the first one is, I believe, gameplay first. So we always, and that's the same with all media time, right? We're here to tell a great story that we can all be excited about, and particularly that the IP is happy with about. They're the ones who are dictating this. And so for me, the biggest challenge has been going from writing 400-page books to writing 2-page scripts. And it's funny because I'm a very spare writer. You know, I write lean, and I'm always getting requests. Can we have a little bit more of this particular thing? Can we deal with this a little bit? Can we get some more page count from you? And now it's like, make it longer, make it longer. And now it's like, make it shorter, make it shorter. It's like, you got 2 pages. You know, like,
You do this in like a tweet, like this needs to be shorter emails.
Well, I'll tell you, tweeting has helped me to compact my thoughts in a smaller form. So.
Now, one thing I find interesting, so Halo, as most of you guys know, Halo is coming up on 2 decades as a franchise, which is absolutely insane. Troy, your new novel is about to come out, and then yesterday we had Cassandra Rose Clark on. Did anybody come to the panel yesterday and check that out? Awesome stuff. Thank you for coming back. Wow. They liked it enough. That's good. That's good stuff. And then Cassandra's novel is going to come out. That's our 30th novel. Wow. So like across, that's not even counting comics and graphic novels. So there is a host of stories that have come before, obviously, and also a host of creative people. And some of them are super talented and very beloved by Halo fans. People like Greg Bear. People like Eric Nyland. Anybody a Bear or Nyland fan? So Kelly, Troy specifically too, like Kelly, did you feel any kind of like weightiness or like, okay, I love Greg Bear stuff and now I'm taking the mantle, only kind of pun intended, with this storyline and some of these characters and bringing it forward in my own new way? What's some of the responsibility there?
Yeah. I have to tell you this story that I was on Podcast Evolved, and
I know, I listened to it. You guys should check out Podcast Evolved. Really good community-run, like lore-based podcast if you're into fiction and stuff. So shout out to Podcast Evolved.
But they had Greg Bear on their show, and actually had ended up toward the end telling him that someone else now had taken some of his ideas and was kind of, can I say smart? Or, okay, I don't want to ruin anything, but just taking 343 Guilty Spark and kind of giving him a new path and a new story, and he had no idea that had happened, and so at the end he's like, well, I'm going to pick up her book and read it, and I was like, oh crap.
We've sold one.
But no, you feel a great responsibility to not only the author, but to everything they created, and to continue to do that same level of work, and just show a lot of respect to what's already there, but then adding your own new things to it.
Troy, what about you? Because you're again kind of trying to, Nyland had stories like The Fall of Reach and First Strike that came out, and again kind of told some of those earlier stories, and now you're also kind of diving into some of that same material. Do you look to it for any kind of inspiration? Do you want to be sure to kind of forge your own path and own voice? How do you approach that?
Mostly I do a ton of research. I read the material, make sure that I've read it at least once, and I don't know, I think I'm probably reading Fall of Reach. Well, I think I've just finished reading that for my 3rd time. And every time I do it, I'm looking for different things, and I discover little different things about the story that I didn't really register before. But mostly, I try to just concentrate on who the character is and being true to that character. And then, I have a story goal, and I want to achieve that story goal without violating who the character is that has come before. And the same was true when I wrote Han Solo, as it is writing the Master Chief. If you cross that line, you do something that isn't true to the character, you're going to hear about it, and I don't want to hear about it.
So stop tweeting.
Yeah.
Get the eye color right.
Get the what?
The eye color right.
Yeah. Well, luckily we have excellent backstops, because no matter how hard you try to get everything right, you're still going to be like 2 degrees off or miss a fact or something, and I get because you do some of it. Yeah. You get a manuscript back saying, wait a minute, you missed this, or the character really would be more focused on that, and that's really, really helpful. I mean, I never have once gotten one of those comments back and thought, oh no, that's wrong. You know, it's always like, oh yeah, I see what they're going at. Sometimes I may not see what they're trying to achieve, but I respect that they're trying to achieve something and try to figure out what it is. You know,
Yeah. And I mean, I can speak from our perspective, from a 343 perspective, like what a joy it is too to be able to work with external authors and creatives like yourselves, because it really is a big family atmosphere. It is a big, and it takes a village to tell stories in a universe so big and so grand. Can we give it up for these guys? Like,
Thank you.
It is such a joy and a pleasure to work with people like yourselves. What we're going to do, we're going to take questions from you guys. So if you have a question, I would like you to line up at the awkwardly low mic in the middle. Did you set that up for me to ask questions? Weird. And so while you guys are lining up and thinking of your questions, I'm going to do another real quick one. If you weren't a writer or an author, what would you be doing?
Gosh,
Anybody can go first.
I might have to think about that one.
For me, it's game design. That's why I started out, and I keep going back.
Okay.
So, whether it's tabletop or video games.
Yeah, I was just going to
always
say,
end up
because you're not even necessarily even just video game. You're a big tabletop guy.
Yeah, I do a lot of tabletop stuff. I'm writing Dungeons & Dragons Endless Quest books now, all sorts of stuff.
All right.
And I also work on video games, too. I worked on Assassin's Creed and Ghost Recon and a whole bunch of different games. So.
Yeah, what other things actually have you guys done, too, besides Halo?
All right. So I'm going to answer the question about what would I be doing if I wasn't a writer. I think the question is, what would I want to be doing versus what would I actually be doing?
What are you qualified for now?
Yeah. So what I would want to be doing would depend on the time of my life that I realized I wasn't going to be a writer.
Okay.
Yeah. Early on, I'd probably have joined the Navy because I went down and saw to San Diego and saw the aircraft carriers and said, "Ooh, toys!" Yeah. But later on, my dad was a cop, which is one of the reasons I wrote The Last Light and Beta Lopez character. And I probably would have gone into law enforcement at various times, because there's points in your career as a writer where you look and you say, "What the hell am I doing?" Right? And at those various points, I've actually looked and said, oh man, maybe I should be a sailor. Maybe I should be a cop, Fortunately, my wife talked me out of it all the time. So, but
I don't know. I speak for everybody. I want him to be an author. Is that good? Yeah. We want you to stay being an author.
Oh, for me, I would probably be a singer-songwriter.
Singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Any
'Cause I love
particular
writing
genre?
songs.
Death metal?
Yeah,
I really want it to be death metal.
Totally. No. I started doing this. I was in the SCA for a while, and so I like medieval ballad type stuff.
That's awesome.
So
good stuff.
And as for franchise, there are 13 different ones.
Okay.
So I won't.
Can you rattle them off?
I can rattle. Most days I can, but World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Star Wars, Star Trek Voyager, Fable, Hello, what else? Hex, Assassin's Creed, and I'm blanking on a couple.
I already want to be Christie Gloden when I grow up, so you're good. You can.
I have
That's
been
my answer.
so lucky. I have been so blessed, and I love what I do, and I'm so lucky to be doing it.
That's amazing. Kelly,
Okay.
do you know what you want to be when you grow up now?
Yeah, archaeologist. I want to be Indiana Jones.
I can see that coming through in your stories, too, which is actually really cool.
It was the love of ancient history,
Yeah.
and I remember watching those movies when I was little, and that's what I wanted to be, and I still want to be that. So.
That is awesome. Troy, what about you, franchises?
my franchises were Forgotten Realms,
Okay.
Planescape, Dark Sun, Stonekeep,
Yeah.
Star Wars, and Halo. Yeah, I don't know. I may have missed one or two, but
That's okay.
yeah.
We won't send them this panel.
You reminded me. I actually got my start writing Ravenloft. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We doing all right? All good there? Everybody's awake still? We're all good? VR line, we're okay? You're getting quieter and quieter over there. All the fans of the books already went through VR and they went other places. That's the problem. All right, well, we are going to turn it over to you guys. Hopefully you have some good questions. I will dodge or deflect them if we need to. So be prepared to have some of them intercepted if necessary. Go ahead and step up. Let us know what your name is and what's on your mind.
Hi, I'm Norm. First, thanks for sharing your stories with us. You mentioned a lot about your process and the research and the running back to 343 and all that you have to do to maintain the storyline. I wanted to know how much freedom do you feel, you talked about respecting other authors' work. How much freedom do you feel when you're writing your stories when it's your turn to make large plot changes? And are you able to convince 343 of things like, oh, maybe
It's about to get awkward. Yeah, what do you think about that?
I think we have extraordinary freedom. The great thing about working with 343 is they kind of allow you to explore and take different avenues. And if it doesn't work or there's some conflict, they just very nicely just rein you back in and kind of point you in a different direction. But they never say, no, you can't do it, because in the saying of no, you might miss something extraordinary for your story. So I've found I have a lot of freedom. I mean, I've thrown some wild things at them too, and
Some bizarre
yeah, just crazy stuff.
space archaeology.
Hey, that's the next one.
I know, it's good.
But no, I felt very fortunate in that they let you be creative. It's a creative company, it's a creative place, and everybody wants to hear everything, even if it doesn't work. So you're allowed to think big.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say a tremendous amount. When we had our first story conference for our first book, my dad was dying of cancer, and he had been a cop for most of his life and a detective. And our first story conference, they said, well, what do you want to do? They told me, the only thing they said, we want it set in the year 2552. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, how about a detective story? And they said, thought for about like 5 seconds and said, yeah, great, we'll do it. And that's where we started Last Light. And then, and I have never found that to be anything but true. Their philosophy seems to be, we'll find a way to make it work.
Right.
Which gives you a tremendous amount of freedom, even though you're writing in an IP that demands you adhere to certain parameters.
Yeah, I mean, the way it worked for me is every time I started process with you guys, you'd say, well, pitch us something, right? And here's one idea that maybe we're thinking about. If you want to take that one, you can run with it, but then pitch us whatever else you want, right? That's how I ended up doing, New Blood with Buck and Dare, is because I'm like, well, this is my favorite game. Can I do that? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. So that worked out real well.
And then I, from a 343 perspective too, one of the reasons why we work with people like this is because of what they bring to the table. Otherwise, again, why go out and kind of chase down the best and the people who have specific talents and expertise to write in certain ways and to tell certain stories. And from a personal perspective, I've not been with Halo from the beginning, so I remember what it's like to experience those stories, want to tell stories of my own, and now being on the opportunity to be telling those stories, I know what it's like to want to have some of that creative freedom and maintain the balance of respecting what came before and what fits with where. So we have that same approach, or at least try to have that same approach with any fellow creative that is playing in the universe. So thank you for the question, though.
Thank you
awesome
very much.
question.
Great question.
All right, this has to be good. That was a good question. They're only allowed to get
No
better.
pressure.
No
I
pressure.
don't think sorry.
He just leaves. Yeah. You're good. What's your name?
My name's Chris.
Okay.
My question's not going to be as good as that. I don't think.
I appreciate the honesty.
I have a question for Troy and Matt. I love your guys' books so much. I recently just reread them as well. You already answered my question, Troy. My question is, when's the sequel?
Fair enough.
But I was wondering if there's already a planned third book for the Alpha 9 series.
Not yet. I would love to write it, but I'm actually working on other projects at the moment. So if and when they're ready to pull the trigger on that, I'm ready to get behind the gun. So.
Awesome.
And it's important to note too that like there are always way more stories that we want to tell than we can tell for a gazillion different reasons, whether it be timing or like bandwidth or where certain things fit. You know, we want to have something kind of come out to align with maybe something else. So a lot of times we are rooting for the same stories to get made that you guys are rooting for. Just trying to find the right time and.
Yeah, and to answer for the people who didn't actually know the answer to your question, Oblivion, which is kind of it's not really a technical sequel to Silent Storm, but it follows a couple months later, is coming out on the 24th of this month.
There you go.
And it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
It's good. Awesome.
can't wait.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
All right. Next up, who do we got? What's your name?
Hello, my name is Obed. Before I ask the question, I gotta say it's really cool seeing the people behind these stories. It's really cool. Nice meeting you guys.
Can you
you.
come forward
Yeah.
to the mic?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you
I
go.
apologize.
There's that powerful
Perfect.
voice.
I apologize. I'm really.
No, you're
That's all right.
You're all good. We are too.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a lot more of you than there are of us. We're way more nervous than you are.
All right. Well, I guess the question is, since you guys dipped into this universe, this lore, is there any particular event, character, or otherwise that you would like to write about?
I kind of want to know.
Cortana.
Oh, Cortana. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody?
I have a crazy idea for a grunge novel. I would love to do that. That'd be
A
fun.
grunt novel?
Oh, yeah.
Dude, I want a grunt platformer.
There you go.
We can combine on this.
You know, I feel pretty blessed writing the Master Chief, so I don't know that I should try to hog anything more. So.
Awesome. Christie,
Unfortunately, because I am working for another game company, there's a non-compete clause. So, like, you know, when I retire in about 20 years, we can maybe have this conversation.
we're going to have a new author named Misty Bolden who's going to write some cool stuff for us. So keep an eye out for it. Great question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to start off by thanking you guys for all the content that you guys make. It's all really, really awesome stuff. But I wanted to ask a little bit about what you guys would give as far as advice goes for anyone who's trying to break out in this industry, just like from the first story or like the publishing process, or what it really takes to like get at your guys' level someday, you know.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds counterintuitive, but you don't want to write a Halo novel
Right.
or a Halo short story. They can't look at them. So what
That
you
is
need
correct.
What you need to do is find there's still some magazines. Some are now online. I started with print back in the old days. But there are some places that will publish your work and make sure you get paid, so it's a professional payment, and start making a name for yourself. And I think it's a lot easier now to do that than it was when I started out, because there's just so many more venues and many more people seeing.
Ebooks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Easier to
ebooks.
get self-published too.
Yeah. And so then hopefully you get yourself an agent at some point, and you tell that agent, I really, really want to walk for this IP, and she will start trying to get that ball rolling for you. But you need to start with your own work, make a name for yourself there, get somebody who can connect you properly, and that's the best route to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, all true.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carlos. First off, I'd like to say it is an absolute honor to see you all. Meet you all, to be precise. This
Thanks.
question is for Mr. Denning. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh, that's all right.
You're all good.
No, I'm nervous.
In regards to Halo Silent Storm, was it at all difficult, living up to what came before in regards to the two novels centered around the Master Chief, The Fall of Reach and First Strike, both by both written by Eric Nyland. Was it at all difficult, trying to live up to what came before?
Well, I wasn't focused on trying to live up to what came before, and whether I succeeded in doing that is up to you guys. You don't get to make that decision. I don't get to make the decision. You're the guys who say, yeah, you did it or you didn't do it. So all I was focused on was really trying to understand who the Master Chief was at that time in his life, and trying to communicate that and make sure that I was honoring not only what Eric did, but what all you guys do, and what the game, because you guys are as responsible for the Master Chief being who he is as anybody is. So, I'm trying to honor that. I'm trying to honor the things that went into the game design of him, and the things where he's appeared in fiction. And I can't say that I was nervous about doing it, wondered if I could do it. I was just focused on how do I do it. And I made, probably 3 pages of notes that I would constantly revise about this is what the Master Chief is thinking, doing, this is what he wants, and then as I'm writing along, I would revise that and say, all right, this is a little more subtle or nuanced iteration of who he is. And then by the time we came back with the reviews, we're narrowing that down and purifying it as we go along. So it's kind of a process, and if you let yourself stop and say, am I living up to it? You're not going to live up to it. You just have to focus on doing the job.
I think it's also important, too, to add to that all of those stories that came before aren't being overwritten. Like, they still exist, and there are people who have never read something like The Fall of Reach or First Strike. So they may read his books first.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, like, those stories still live on for anybody who wants to read them. And I think that's kind of the beauty of them, is the books that you read, the games that you play, no matter kind of when you experience them or how many times you go back, when you're kind of in the mood for that story or that flavor or that voice of author, it's right there for you, which is awesome. So you kind of don't have to worry about trying to live up, because you want to be honest to your own voice and create a vision, because it's meant to all live together, not overwrite the thing that came before as well. Good question, though.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael, and I had a question for all 5 of you. I was just curious, as a technical side, do you guys prefer writing with pen and paper, or do you guys do all typing?
Type. If it wasn't for a backspace key, I wouldn't have a career, right? The one class I got a C in high school was typing, right? And my handwriting is much worse. If you see me sign anything here today, you'll know all about that. But seriously, if it wasn't for the fact that there were computers I could write on, I'd be out of a job. Wouldn't be able to do it.
I started I'm so old that I started before computers existed, so I was typing on typewriters, actual typewriters, my first stories.
Same.
Yeah. And now I tend to do both. What I do is I type my first draft in, right straight out of my head onto the keyboard into the computer. And when I get stuck, I'll stop, I'll pick up a pen and paper and switch the way my brain is working by switching the physical actions that I use. So one of my favorite methods for doing that is what I call 3 questions. I get stuck, like, how is the Master Chief going to get from this side of the canyon to that side of the canyon? And I'll stop and say, okay, 3 ways the Master Chief can cross the canyon, and just write down the first 3 things that come off of my mind. And usually, by the time I hit the 5th or 6th one, I've because I never stop at 3, you're brainstorming and it just keeps coming. But as you're doing that, it becomes obvious what the solution is, and that solves it. So I make notes for each chapter before I start it in longhand, asking questions about what this chapter is going to be, what everybody wants out of the out of the scene, and I write the notes and by longhand to do that. So I find it important to be able to switch my thinking back and forth, the way I actually approach the story, by what I'm doing physically.
I too started out with a typewriter, but I never did longhand. I have a friend of mine who writes her whole first draft longhand, and then when she enters it into the computer from that draft, she can make the changes then. But I transitioned very well to computer. I find that the speed that I can type at matches my thoughts, and writing so far behind them that I kind of lose it. So yeah, computers all the way.
I do all my research and notes and plotting, which I mentioned before. I take a long time to do that. It's all in notebooks. It's very chaotic, random pieces of paper. I should stick to one notebook so I can find everything, but I'll pick up 5 or 6. I have them all laying around my office, and a big whiteboard. And I do that for a long time, and that way those are very mobile, and I can take them. You know, I'm a mom, so I sit in carpool and I write Halo notes and do research just from my phone or whatever. But then when I sit down to actually write my rough draft, I do all that on the computer.
I'd say mostly computer, but like some of you, doing it in a different medium will kind of trigger different parts of your brain, and sometimes it's actually easier to think of certain things if I'm just jotting stuff down. Sometimes I can get too much into one mode by just seeing it on a screen, so I need to shake it up and change it to get maybe past a block or just to think about something in a different way. So I would say both as well, just depending on the circumstance.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello, this is a question for Matt.
Oh, hi.
I'm sure some of you are aware of the reception the Halo 5 story had on the community. Did that at all affect you, or how did you feel writing what comes after Halo 5 with Bad Blood?
Right. Well, I loved Halo 5, so I was a big fan of that, and it was easy for me. The thing is, when I started doing New Blood, it was about Buck and Dare, right? It was a story about how they become, or how Buck becomes a Spartan. And when I started writing it, they didn't actually tell me that Buck was going to be a Spartan. They just said, "Oh, this is going to work up with everything." They didn't tell me he was going to be in the game, right? So they're like, "Oh, this is going to work with our plans fantastically." I'm like, "Well, I don't know why," but eventually they're like, "Okay, hey, by the way, as we're finishing up the draft list, we have some news for you." I'm like, "Oh, it's so cool!" So I was really excited about that, and then it seemed a natural thing from there to move into post Halo 5 for the next book, because Buck had really told most of his personal history in New Blood, so it didn't make sense to go back and tell little bits of that. It seemed at that stage we should move forward, and I was fortunate enough that they were. This is one of the neat things about writing Buck is he's not the star, right? He's a great secondary player. He's not the Master Chief, so that gives me a lot of room to mess around and do stuff. If I wanted to do a Master Chief novel right after that point, I think they would have said, "No, you can't do this right now." But because it was Buck, they're like, "Oh, you can split them off and do your own thing, and then he can rejoin if we need him later," right? So for me, that was fantastic. It worked out really well.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, and our last question, who do we have?
Hey, my name's Alexander. I'm hoping this isn't a vague question, but it's no secret that military themes are a big thing in Halo. I mean, UNSC and everything. When writing, from the perspective of a soldier, who have you guys consulted on that kind of stuff? It's probably a question that could be answered easily just with a Google search on my part, but I'd love to hear it from you guys.
I know a lot of guys who are soldiers, right? So, and I've known them for a long time, so I have a lot of respect for them. So I draw on that kind of stuff. I've also written for things like Ghost Recon, right, which is all about modern special ops type stuff. So for me to get in that headset, or that mindset, even though I'm not even close to being a soldier, I think that helps me a lot for that kind of thing.
I read a lot of field manuals. I actually pick up used field manuals for military, and I just sit down and read 5 pages at a time. And it takes a while to get through them, but I read those just so I know how the equipment works, how the soldiers think. Do that. I read books on tactical, like Special Forces, Tactical Combat. Any book that has the SAS in the title, I'll read because those actually describe what Special Forces work is like. And there's a lot of Navy SEAL, what a Navy SEAL does kind of books that are out. And you read that and it's all bullshit, But there's a lot of, you learn to tell, right, this guy really knows what he's talking about, this guy doesn't. And so that's what I do, is I just read all of those technical manuals, all the field manuals, all the instructions. I mean, boring stuff.
I think that's the best writer's answer I could have got. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, and also, like I mentioned on our franchise team, so we have 3 writers. There's myself. I mentioned Jeremy earlier, but we also have Kenneth Peters. Kenneth is a former Marine himself, and so literally I have sitting 6 feet away from me a perfect resource of somebody who has that perspective. And I also find myself even like relying on, if we're working on something together, if I need to really rely on something that is technical jargon heavy, like I'll pass that over to him for like a first instance. Like, hey, I need something that fits this, or just fits in this either description or function. Like, what would be the most realistic aspects and things to fill in, and then we can kind of branch from that, because it's sci-fi as well. So a lot of times you start with a military base, and then it's like, okay, do we need to go somewhere else from this? But I love like relying on people like him and others in our studio who have that first-hand expertise. And I also think that it's important to know where your own expertise stops, and then who to turn to rely on for that. So, but yeah.
All right, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Did you guys have a good time? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for not just being up here, but for doing what you do, for telling stories in our universe that mean a lot to a lot of people. Just a tiny fraction of them are here right now. And thank you most importantly to you guys. If you guys were not reading our books and playing our games and checking out our comics, we wouldn't be able to do these awesome jobs. So thank you guys so much for continuing to invest in this universe that, again, means as much to us as it does to you. So you guys are the real heroes here. So thank you very much. If you want to track us down on social, it's up there. Only say nice things. We've met in person. That makes us friends. So if you say something, then it's mean. It's extra mean because we've met. But yeah, please keep in touch. And again, we've got Troy Denning's new novel that is coming out in just a few short weeks. Pick that up. Right, the week after that, is another new book, and that'll be Meridian Divide. And then we've got other books that are in the works that we just can't talk about, but I can't wait to. So that's going to do it for us. We've got some awesome stuff coming up. I think we got Steve and Jen coming up, Minolta, right? So if you like, Master Chief and Cortana and the people who make their voices, they're supposed to be here in like 10, 15 minutes or something like that. So thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.